Is this some kind of joke, Colonel? The words, sharp and full of disbelief, cut through the heavy heat rising off the flight line. Chief Warrant Officer Jackson, his face showing professional frustration, stared not at his commanding officer, but at the old man standing beside him. The old man, Henry Cooper, seemed unbothered by the heat, the roar of distant jets, or the anger in the young officer's voice. He was a relic, wearing faded, grease-stained coveralls that had seen better decades. His hands, thick with hard skin and marked with the fine lines of 1,000 repairs, hung calmly at his sides. He simply looked at the silent machine before them. An AH-64 Apache, the peak of modern air combat technology, made as useless as a museum display by a ghost in its own system. Colonel Richards sighed. The sound barely heard over the whine of a C-130 taxiing in the distance. "Chief, this is Mr. Cooper. He's here to give us a second opinion." Jackson let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "A second opinion, sir? With all due respect, my team has been working on this aircraft for 72 hours straight. We've run every test known to man. We've replaced the FADEC, inspected the turbine, checked every inch of the fuel lines, and changed half the sensors. The digital systems are clean. The computer says there is nothing wrong with it, yet the Port T700 engine won't go past 50% on startup. We have engineers from General Electric on a video call. What we don't need is," he pointed vaguely at Henry, "old-fashioned help." Henry's eyes never left the Apache. He was 80-something years old. His face showed a life lived under harsh conditions and great pressure. His eyes, though slightly clouded with age, had a focus that was unsettling. They weren't just looking at the helicopter. They were studying its position, the way it sat on its landing gear, the subtle shine of its composite skin. He was listening to its silence. A small crowd of younger mechanics had gathered at a distance. They were the best of the best, technology experts who could work with $1 billion weapon system through a laptop. They had been beaten by this mystery, their confidence worn down with every failed engine test. Now they watched this strange scene, a mixture of curiosity and the same scorn their boss was showing. Whispers moved through them. Who was the old man? Some retired legend the colonel knew? A good luck charm? Let him look. "Chief," Richard said, his voice now carrying a hard edge of command that Jackson could not ignore. Jackson gritted his teeth and stepped back with dramatic defeat. "Fine. The flight line is yours, Mr. Cooper. Just please try not to touch anything. It's a very delicate piece of equipment." Henry gave the colonel a slow, careful nod of thanks and began to walk. He didn't go to the open engine cover where Jackson's team had been focused. Instead, he started at the tail, his rough fingers gently touching the line of the stabilizer. He moved with a slow, shuffling grace, a man completely comfortable in this world of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid. Every movement was efficient, his attention complete. He circled the Apache, his head tilted, as if listening for a secret. The young mechanics exchanged smirks. He looked like a farmer checking his prize animal, not a technician diagnosing a turboshaft engine. He finally arrived at the port side, stopping below the engine that had troubled the base's best mechanics for 3 days. He didn't look up at the complex array of tubes, wires, and blades. He knelt down, his old knees cracking in protest, and looked underneath at the place where the engine housing met the body. "Flashlight," he said, his voice gravelly and unused. A young sergeant, eager to break the tension, rushed to hand him a high-powered LED torch. Jackson rolled his eyes, crossing his arms. "Sir, we've had military-grade imaging equipment in there. I promise you a flashlight isn't going to show anything we missed." Henry ignored him. He took the light and moved its beam across the underbelly of the aircraft. He wasn't just looking. He was watching how the light reflected, how it caught the edges of rivets and seams. He laid one hand flat against the metal skin of the helicopter, closing his eyes. The mechanic saw an old man touching an airplane. Colonel Richards saw a master connecting with a machine. He had heard the stories, whispers from old-timers, about a man they called the Ghost, a mechanic from the Vietnam era who could feel a hairline crack through 3 inches of steel. He had made the call to bring Henry here as a last resort, a desperate prayer to a forgotten god of the flight line. After a full minute of this silent communion, Henry opened his eyes. He pushed himself slowly to his feet. He reached into the deep pocket of his coveralls and pulled out a small worn leather roll. He untied it with practiced fingers. Inside, nestled in soft cloth, were not the gleaming laser-cut tools of a modern mechanic, but a collection of oddly shaped hand-forged instruments, polished smooth by decades of use. Jackson's jaw tightened. What in God's name are those? Henry selected one. It was a long, slender piece of metal bent at a precise, unusual angle, its tip ground to razor sharpness. It looked more like a dental pick made in a blacksmith shop than a tool for an Apache. "You are not putting that thing anywhere near my engine," Jackson snapped, his professional composure finally breaking. "That's it. I'm calling this, sir. I appreciate your effort, but this is a waste of everyone's time." As Henry held the strange tool in his hand, the sunlight shining off its hand-polished surface, the world seemed to slow for a moment. The whine of the distant jet faded, replaced by the thumping rotor wash of a Huey in a monsoon. The sharp smell of jet fuel was suddenly mixed with the damp metallic scent of blood and fear. He wasn't on a clean American flight line. He was in a muddy clearing in the AH-64 Valley, rain plastering his hair to his face. A young pilot, his face pale with shock, was screaming over the storm. "We have to go. They're coming." The Huey's engine was sputtering, a critical part severed by a piece of shrapnel. There were no spare parts, no tools, just the wreckage of a burned-out truck nearby. In his mind's eye, he saw his younger self hammering a red-hot piece of leaf spring against a rock, shaping it, grinding it, creating the very tool he now held in his hand. He had used it to bypass the damaged part, a fix that should have been impossible, and the Huey had lifted off just as the enemy broke through the trees, carrying a dozen wounded men to safety. The tool wasn't just metal, it was a memory. It was a promise. Back in the present, Sergeant Davis, a young but sharp mechanic who had been watching the entire scene, felt anger tighten in his stomach. He had seen the way Jackson was treating the old man, the complete disrespect, but he had also seen the look in Mr. Cooper's eyes. It was a look of deep, unshakable certainty. Davis had seen that look once before in the eyes of a bomb disposal technician about to disarm a complex IED. It was the look of a man who saw a different reality than everyone else, a world of cause and effect, invisible to the untrained eye. Jackson took a step toward Henry, his hand raised as if to physically stop him. "Mr. Cooper,
I am ordering you to step away from the aircraft. You are a civilian, and you are interfering with critical military equipment. Do not make me call the security forces." This was the final insult, the ultimate overreach. The threat of arrest hung in the hot, still air. The other mechanics shifted uncomfortably. This had gone from a curiosity to a crisis. Davis knew he couldn't challenge a chief warrant officer directly. It would be his career. But he couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. He quietly pulled out his phone, keeping it low and out of Jackson's sight. His fingers flew across the screen, sending a text message not to a friend, but to the colonel's executive aide, a man he knew was monitoring the situation from the command tower. The message was brief and urgent. "Sir,
C.W. Jackson is about to have Mr. O. Cooper escorted off the flight line by security. He's threatening to detain him. The colonel needs to get back down here now. I think the old man found it. I really think he found it. He hit send. The message flew across the base's network. A digital spark of rebellion. In that moment, the audience and Sergeant Davis knew something Jackson and his crew did not. Help was on the way. The balance of power was about to shift, and the quiet dignity of the humble hero was about to be proven right in the most spectacular way imaginable. Inside the climate-controlled quiet of the base command building, Colonel Richards stormed back into his office, his face serious. His aide met him at the door, phone in hand. "Sir," a text from Sergeant Davis on the flight line. Richards grabbed the phone and read the message, his expression hardening. "Get me the base archives, now." The aide, already expecting the command, had the number on speed dial. A moment later, a ready voice answered. "Archives Specialist Moore speaking." "Moore, this is Colonel Richards. I need a service file lookup. Cooper, Henry Cooper. He would have served from the late 60s to the early 80s. Aviation maintenance." There was frantic clicking of a keyboard on the other end. "One moment, sir. Got it. Cooper, Henry. Wow. Okay, sir. This file is extensive." "Read me the commendations," Specialist Richards ordered, pacing behind his desk. "Yes, sir. Let's see. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross, 16 Air Medals, 1 with a V for Valor, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. Sir, the list of commendations is 4 pages long." Richards stopped pacing. "What about the citations, the narratives?" "Right. The Distinguished Service Cross citation reads, 'For extraordinary heroism in action, on the 12th of March 1969, Specialist Cooper, with complete disregard for his own safety, remained with a downed medevac helicopter under intense enemy fire. For 6 hours, using improvised tools forged from wreckage, he repaired a catastrophically damaged rotor assembly and a severed fuel line, enabling the evacuation of 9 critically wounded soldiers. Sir, there's more. A dozen more just like it. Field expedient engine swaps under fire, landing gear repairs during active combat. They called him the ghost of the A-Show because he could make dead birds fly again." Richards felt a chill run down his spine despite the office's cool air. He had known Cooper was good, but this was the stuff of legend. He was standing in the presence of a giant and hadn't even realized the man's true greatness. "There's a note here from General Anderson," the specialist added. "It seems he was one of the pilots Cooper saved. The note just says, 'If this man ever asked for anything, give it to him. He is the finest battlefield mechanic this army has ever produced. Full stop.'" Richards hung up the phone. His aide looked at him, eyes wide. "Sir?" "Get my car," Richards commanded, "and get 4-star General Anderson on the phone. Tell him a ghost from his past is on our flight line, and he's being threatened with arrest." Back on the tarmac, the confrontation had reached its peak. Henry, holding his strange handmade tool, had ignored Jackson's threat completely. He was pointing with its delicate tip toward a spot deep within the engine's interior, a place buried under a nest of wires and tubes. "There," Henry said, his voice calm. "The bleed air valve's pneumatic line. There's a crack." Jackson squinted, his face red with anger. "That's impossible. We inspected that entire section twice. The fiber optic camera showed nothing. There is no crack." He stepped forward, his body blocking Henry's access. "That's it. I've had enough. Sergeant," he barked at one of the younger mechanics, "go get the security forces. Tell them we have an unauthorized civilian interfering with military property." The young sergeant froze, looking from the furious chief warrant officer
to the impossibly calm old man, and then to the silent colonel who had brought him there. It was a questionable order, but it was an order nonetheless. But before he could move, a new sound cut through the air. Not a jet engine or a helicopter, but the squeal of tires on pavement. A black command vehicle, a Ford Expedition with official government plates, was driving directly onto the flight line, breaking a dozen protocols. It screeched to a halt just yards from the Apache. The mechanics snapped to attention. Jackson spun around, his mouth open at the breach of regulations. Colonel Richards emerged from the passenger side, his face like thunder. But it was the man who emerged from the back seat that caused every jaw on the flight line to drop. He was an older man, but he moved with powerful, coiled energy. He wore a flight suit, and on his shoulders were the 4 gleaming stars of a full general. His face was a mask of serious purpose. It was General Anderson, the visiting commander from Army Futures Command. The sight of a 4-star general appearing unannounced on an active flight line was so unprecedented, it was like seeing a unicorn. The world seemed to stop. The wind died down. The distant hum of the base faded into nothing. Jackson's anger evaporated, replaced by cold, sickening dread. He snapped the most rigid salute of his life. "General, sir, I was not aware you were—" General Anderson didn't even look at him. He walked right past the saluting chief warrant officer, his eyes locked on one man. He walked past the state-of-the-art helicopter, past the assembled crew of expert technicians, and stopped directly in front of Henry Cooper. The entire flight line held its breath. The 4-star general, a man who commanded armies and advised presidents, clicked his heels together. He raised his hand to his forehead and delivered the sharpest, most respectful salute Jackson had ever witnessed. It was a salute of profound respect, a gesture from a subordinate to a superior, though no rank insignia graced Henry's faded coveralls. "Henry," the general's voice was thick with emotion. "My God, it's really you." Henry slowly lowered his tool. A flicker of recognition sparked in his ancient eyes. He gave a small, almost invisible nod. "Jack, you got old." A choked laugh escaped the general. He dropped his salute and looked at the stunned faces of the mechanics around him. His voice boomed across the tarmac, each word a hammer blow of truth. "Men, you have the privilege of standing in the presence of a living legend. This is Henry Cooper. When I was a 23-year-old captain, my bird went down in the AH-64 Valley. We were surrounded, taking heavy fire with multiple wounded. No one could get to us, but Henry Cooper flew in on a dust-off Huey that had no business being in the air. He landed under a hail of bullets, jury-rigged our busted engine with nothing but a multi-tool and some wire, and then flew his own bird out with mine flying shaky escort, saving 18 American lives. The man you see before you is not a mechanic. He is a miracle worker." He turned to Colonel Richards. "Colonel, read the man's citation. I want everyone to hear it." Richards pulled out his phone, his hands steady. His voice was clear and strong as he read the official account of the Distinguished Service Cross, the story of the impossible repair under fire, the quiet heroism that had never sought a spotlight. As he read, the smirks on the faces of the young mechanics melted away, replaced by expressions of pure, complete awe. They weren't looking at a crazy old man anymore. They were looking at a giant. When Richards finished, a deep silence settled over the group. The general's gaze, now as cold and hard as stone, fell upon Chief Warrant Officer Jackson. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet threat in his tone was more terrifying than any shout. "Chief," he began, his voice dangerously low,
You have millions of dollars of diagnostic equipment. You have laptops that can measure the tolerance of a turbine blade to a millionth of an inch. But none of that equipment can teach you to listen. None of it can teach you humility, and none of it can teach you respect. He gestured with his chin toward Henry. This man's hands have forgotten more about keeping men alive by keeping these machines in the air than you will ever learn from a computer screen. Your diagnostics told you nothing was wrong. He listened to the silence, and it told him everything. You failed because you thought you were smarter than the machine. He succeeded because he knew he wasn't. The public rebuke was complete, delivered in front of Jackson's entire team. The chief warrant officer's face, once red with anger, was now pale with shame. He looked at the ground, unable to meet the general's eyes. Just then, Henry Cooper, the object of all this respect, took a shuffling step forward. He looked at the humiliated young officer, and his voice, when it came, was not one of triumph, but of gentle teaching. "It's not your fault, son," he said. And the kindness in his tone was perhaps the most surprising thing of all. The machines are loud, the computers are loud. You were trained to listen to all that noise. But the machine, it always whispers the truth. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it. He held up his handmade tool, the one forged in the fire of war. Your camera couldn't see the crack because it's a pressure fracture. It only opens when the pneumatic line is under the specific stress of a 50% startup. It's invisible when the engine is cold and still. Your diagnostics are looking for a state of being. I was listening for a moment of becoming. The moment it becomes broken. As he spoke, another memory surfaced, sharp and clear. The memory not of making the tool, but of using it. His younger self in that muddy clearing, pressing the tool's tip against the damaged part of the Huey. He wasn't just looking. His fingers, his entire arm, had become a sensor, feeling the subtle wrong vibration, the tiny tremor that told him where the metal was weakest. The tool wasn't just a wrench. It was an extension of his own senses, a channel for wisdom, born of pure, desperate necessity. He had learned to feel the breaking point. Back on the hot tarmac, he looked at Jackson. You don't find a problem like this with your eyes. You find it with your hands. In the immediate aftermath, everything moved with a new and deep sense of purpose. Following Henry's precise instructions, a maintenance crew, including a now silent and humbled CWO Jackson, carefully removed the indicated pneumatic line. There, under a microscope in the maintenance bay, was the fracture. It was almost invisible to the naked eye. A hairline crack no thicker than a spider's thread, but it was exactly where Henry had said it would be. The part was replaced. The Apache's cowling was sealed. With General Anderson and Colonel Richards watching, the pilot started the startup sequence. The port engine spooled up, whining past 50%, then 60%, then 80%, until it settled into a perfect, stable, deafening roar. The ghost in the machine had been removed. General Anderson turned to Colonel Richards. I want a new mandatory training module developed for every maintenance crew on this base, and I want it distributed to the entire Army Aviation Branch. Call it Advanced Tactile Diagnostics and Intuitive Engineering. And the lead instructor, he said, placing a hand on Henry's shoulder, will be Mr. Cooper, if he'll accept the paid position. The next day, a formal base-wide commendation was issued, not only honoring Henry for his discovery, but also officially documenting his legendary service record for a new generation. CWO Jackson was not disciplined in the traditional sense. His punishment was to be the first student enrolled in Henry's new class. Weeks later, the scene was much quieter. Inside the base's main workshop, Jackson stood before a workbench, clumsily trying to use a hand file on a small block of aluminum. His movements were jerky, uncertain. He was trying to copy one of the simple handmade tools from Henry's leather roll and failing miserably. A shadow fell over the bench. Henry stood beside him, holding a steaming mug of coffee. He watched for a moment, then set his mug down. He didn't say a word about the incident on the flight line. He simply reached out and gently adjusted Jackson's grip on the file. "Easy now," the old man said, his voice a low rumble. "Don't fight it. Let the tool do the work. Feel how it wants to cut." Under the old veteran's guidance, Jackson's strokes became smoother, more confident. He was still clumsy, but for the first time, he wasn't just forcing the tool against the metal. He was listening to it. He was beginning to understand. In the quiet of the workshop, away from the pressure and the noise, a different kind of repair was taking place. One of mentorship, humility, and the timeless transfer of wisdom. Henry Cooper's story is a powerful reminder that the greatest tools we have are not always found in a toolbox, but in the hands and hearts of those who came before us. True expertise is earned in fire, not just downloaded from a screen. If you were inspired by this story of quiet valor, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who appreciates the quiet masters among us.